Hello everyone. Today we will step into a night that looked peaceful. But underneath, it was already cracking. The rain was tapping on the windows. Software persistent. Inside, the dining room glowed in warm light. Golden, safe, or so I thought. My family sat around the table. Laughter floated through the air. Wine glasses clinked gently. My sister sat at the far end. Her smile? Perfect. Too perfect. I let myself believe we were having a good night. No arguments, no cold silences. Just family. But her eyes told another story. They moved. From my plate, to my hands, to the watch on my wrist. Not admiration. Calculation. She leaned toward our cousin, whispered. They laughed. And then, just for a second, looked at me. That laugh wasn't innocent. It was a test. And I knew it. The fire in the fireplace crackled. Each pop felt sharper than the last. My mother poured more wine. My father asked my sister about her job. I smiled. But it was a smile that hurt. It was a feeling I knew too well. Like when we were children. And she'd blamed me for breaking her doll. A doll she had destroyed. Back then, I learned something important. The truth doesn't always save you. And the way she leaned back that night told me she was ready to play again. Only this time, the game would cost more than I could imagine. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you really like what I'm doing here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What time is it right now? Because when this story ends, you'll remember where you were. You'll remember the feeling. That night, I didn't know her plan. I didn't know she would reach for everything I had. But I did know one thing. She never stopped when she got what she wanted. She always wanted more. And this time, I wasn't sure I had anything left to give. It started with something small. So small, I almost let it slide. A whisper in the kitchen. Late at night, the kind you hear, only when you're not supposed to be listening. I'd gone in for water. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And then, her voice. Low. Sharp. Talking to someone on the phone. I froze in the doorway. Not close enough to hear everything, but close enough to catch the tone. That careful, honeyed tone she used when she was making a deal. The kind of deal that always came at someone else's expense. I leaned closer. A name slipped out. Mine. Followed by a pause and a little laugh. A laugh I'd heard before. The laugh she used when she was getting away with something. My grip tightened around the glass in my hand. I knew I should step in. Ask her who she was talking to. But I didn't. Because sometimes, it's more dangerous to let someone know you're listening than it is to simply walk away. She ended the call with a soft goodbye. Then, she turned. Saw me. Her eyes widened for just a moment. Then came that smile. The smile that made you doubt what you'd heard. The smile that rewrote the moment before it had a chance to settle. What are you doing up so late? She asked. Her tone was light. Too light. I said I couldn't sleep. She nodded, like she believed me, but I knew she didn't. That night, I lay in bed. My heart heavy, my mind replaying every word I'd caught, every pause, every carefully hidden edge in her voice. The next morning, she was all warmth, making coffee, asking about my day, acting like nothing had happened. But I knew. This was the first ripple, the quiet start of something bigger, the kind of storm that doesn't announce itself with thunder, but with the faintest, almost invisible, shift in the air. And deep down, I felt it. The air had already changed. The day of the will reading, I told myself it was just a formality. We'd all sit. We'd all listen. we'd all get what was fair. The lawyer's office was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice the tick of the clock on the wall. Each second, falling heavier than the last. My sister sat to my left. Perfect posture, hands folded neatly in her lap, a calm mask. That only made me more uneasy. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began. At first, it was exactly what I expected. Small bequests to cousins, keepsakes to friends, a donation to charity. Then, he said my sister's name, not once, but over and over. Her name was tied to property, to accounts, to investments I didn't even know existed. And when he finally said mine, it was for something small, symbolic, a gesture, not a legacy. I sat there, frozen, trying to understand. This wasn't the division my parents had always promised. It wasn't even close. I glanced at her. Her lips curved, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. She didn't look surprised. She looked satisfied. The lawyer went on, explaining clauses and conditions. Words blurred together. All I could hear was the roar in my own ears. I wanted to stand, to say this wasn't right, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I understood something. This hadn't been an accident. This had been prepared, planned, shaped over years, in conversations I wasn't part of, in whispers I'd never heard. When the meeting ended, she placed a hand on my arm. Warm, gentle, the way you'd comfort a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "It's what they wanted," she said softly. Her voice was sweet. Her eyes were steel. I walked out of that office with a folder in my hand and a hollow in my chest. Not because I'd lost money, but because I'd just realized the fight for my family's legacy had already been lost. In public, she was flawless. Every word was measured, every smile perfectly timed. She laughed at the right moments. She listened just long enough to make people feel seen. People loved her. They trusted her. And that was her greatest weapon. Because in private, the mask slipped, and what hid beneath was colder than ice. A week after the will reading, we attended a family friend's anniversary party. Dozens of people I'd known my whole life were there. It should have been easy. It wasn't. From the moment we walked in, she was on stage, hugging relatives, complimenting outfits, telling warm stories about our parents. People ate it up, every word, every charming laugh. Then came the first cut, a small one. So small, no one else noticed. She was talking to an aunt. I was close enough to hear. "Well, things have been hard for her lately," she said. A pause, a sympathetic tilt of her head. "She's still adjusting." Adjusting? Adjusting to what? Losing what should have been mine? Having my own sister rewrite our parents' intentions? But I didn't react. Because that's how she worked. She baited you, then made you look unstable when you snapped. Later, she turned it up a notch. I was across the room when she told an old family friend, "I just hope she can find some peace. After everything." The way she said it, soft, pained, made it sound like I was fragile, like I was someone to pity. And that was the real trick. She didn't attack head on. She let the poison seep in slowly, one careful drop at a time. By the end of the night, I'd smiled so much my jaw ached. Not because I was happy, because I was trying to hold myself together, trying not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. As we left, she leaned close. Her breath brushed my ear. "Everyone adores you," she whispered. Her hand squeezed mine, too tight. I knew then, this wasn't just about what she'd taken. It was about control, and she wasn't done yet. It started with a box. An old, dusty box buried in the back of my parents' attic. I hadn't gone looking for it. I was searching for photo albums. Something to remind me of better times. But when I pulled the box out, it was heavier than it looked. And inside, it wasn't memories. It was paper. Stacks of it. Old bank statements, property tax receipts, letters from lawyers. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor. The air was thick with dust. The wooden beams above me creaked in the wind, and I began to read. The first few documents were harmless, but then I saw it, her name, over and over again. Not just recent years back, transactions I never knew about, joint accounts with my parents that I wasn't on, property transfers I'd never been told about. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, bit by bit. She had been moving pieces into place, and I hadn't seen any of it. There were letters, too, carefully folded, some in my father's handwriting, some typed on law firm letterhead. One in particular made my stomach twist. A letter from 10 years ago. From my parents' attorney, confirming the adjustments to the will. Adjustments in her favor. Adjustments I hadn't even known were made. I felt the heat rise in my chest. This hadn't happened overnight. She'd been building this for years, quietly, patiently, and the worst part? My parents had gone along with it. Whether by persuasion, by pressure, or by believing whatever story she told them. I sat there in the dim light, surrounded by proof. Proof that the betrayal wasn't sudden. It was a long game. And she'd been winning from the start. When I finally put the papers back, my hands were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the realization that this wasn't just about greed. It was about removing me, piece by piece, from the life I thought I had. And as I climbed down from the attic, one thought wouldn't leave me. If she'd planned this for so long, what else had she already put in motion? It began with whispers, not the kind you hear directly, the kind that reach you secondhand, twisted, bent, stripped of their original truth. The first came from my cousin. She called one afternoon, her voice careful, too careful. "She's worried about you," she said. "She thinks you're not handling things well." I asked what that meant. There was a pause. Then, "Just, maybe you're still upset about the will." Still upset, as if betrayal had an expiration date. I brushed it off, told myself it was just one conversation, but it wasn't. A week later, my neighbor stopped me in the driveway. She asked if I was doing better. "Better than what?" I asked. She looked surprised. "Oh, I just heard you'd been having a hard time lately." The words clung to me, not because they were cruel, because they were gentle, the kind of gentle that makes people believe them, and I knew exactly whose hand was guiding them. My sister didn't accuse me outright. She didn't have to. She planted seeds, tiny ones, in careful soil, and then she stepped back, letting other people water them until they grew into something unrecognizable. Family dinners felt different now. Conversations hushed when I walked in. Smiles were tight. Questions loaded. It wasn't what she said about me. It was how she said it. The sigh before the sentence. The lowered voice. The glance toward the floor. As if she was protecting me. Protecting me from myself. I'd seen her do this to other people. Colleagues, old friends, neighbors. It always ended the same way, with her standing in the center, untouchable, while the person she targeted stood alone. And I could feel it happening. Slowly, quietly. The family was shifting, not because they had proof, but because they'd been told a story where I wasn't the victim. I was the problem.
I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers, the looks, the way people tilted their heads at me, like I was fragile glass about to break. So I decided I would confront her, face to face. No more shadows, no more guessing. I called her, told her to meet me at the cafe near the old post office, neutral ground, public enough that she couldn't cause a scene, or so I thought. When she walked in, she looked like she was stepping into a magazine spread, hair perfectly styled, that soft beige coat she wore when she wanted to look approachable. A smile, small, careful, just enough to make the people around us see her as the calm one. She sat down across from me. "I don't have long," she said lightly, placing her phone on the table. It was recording. I knew it instantly. I started slowly, told her I knew about the changes to the will, told her I'd found the documents, that I'd seen her name on transactions going back years. She didn't deny it. She just tilted her head. "So? So?" My voice shook. "You took everything, and now you're turning the family against me." Her lips curved, barely. "I'm not turning anyone. I'm just helping them see the truth." I leaned forward. "This isn't truth. It's manipulation." She sat back, raised her voice just enough for the tables nearby to hear. "I'm worried about you. I've been trying to help you, but you keep attacking me." It was a performance, a flawless one. Every eye in that cafe turned toward us, and in that moment I knew she'd flipped the script. If I pressed harder, I'd look unhinged. If I walked away, I'd look guilty. So I did the only thing I could. I sat there, silent, while she sipped her coffee as if nothing had happened. When she left, she touched my shoulder. The gesture looked tender to anyone watching, but her grip was tight, painful. She leaned close. "I told you," she whispered. "You're making this too easy." I stayed in that chair long after she was gone. The coffee had gone cold, so had the hope that this could be solved with words, because words were her weapon, and she had just won this round without even breaking a sweat.
It wasn't just money anymore. It was pieces of my life. Pieces that had no price tag, but meant everything. It started with a phone call from my aunt. "I found the quilt your grandmother made," she said. "I'll drop it by your sister's place tomorrow." My sister's place, not mine. Even though that quilt had been on my bed since I was 12. I tried to correct her, tried to say it belonged to me. But she sounded so certain, so sure it had always been my sister's. That was when I realized she wasn't just taking things. She was rewriting the story of who they belonged to. Family photo albums appeared in her house, on her shelves, in frames on her walls. Photos of me, of birthdays, of vacations we'd all taken together. When I asked for copies, she said she didn't have time to scan them. She smiled when she said it. Even my mother's jewelry box, a small wooden chest with a broken clasp, ended up in her possession. When I asked why, she told me, "Mom gave it to me years ago. You must have forgotten." I hadn't forgotten, because I had been there the day my mother handed it to me. But in her version of the story, that never happened. Friends I'd known since childhood started telling me stories I didn't recognize. They'd mention events, and somehow, in their memory, my sister was always the central figure. Always the one who made things happen. My name was fading. I walked into my parents' old house one afternoon, the place she now controlled, and it felt like stepping into someone else's life. The furniture was rearranged, photos were gone, even the smell was different. Room by room, she was erasing me, not in anger, not in haste, but with a steady, deliberate patience. And the cruelest part? When people visited, they'd marvel at how she'd kept the family spirit alive. They saw a caretaker, not a thief. I wanted to scream, but I knew. The louder I shouted, the more she'd twist my voice into something ugly. So I walked out of that house with my fists clenched, knowing I'd just lost more than possessions. I was losing the evidence that I had ever belonged. The day she moved in. It was raining. Not the kind of rain that sweeps through and clears the air. The kind that lingers. Cold. Unshakable. I stood at the edge of the driveway, watching the moving truck back in. The sound of the engine rumbled through my chest. Boxes slid down the ramp. Furniture I'd grown up with, disappearing into her control. She didn't look at me. Not once. She gave instructions to the movers like she'd been rehearsing for weeks. Which, knowing her, she had. By noon, her car was parked in my father's old spot. By evening, the curtains were different. By nightfall, the lights in the windows glowed in patterns I didn't recognize. I walked through the front door. Still my family's door in my mind. And the air felt wrong. The living room was rearranged. My mother's armchair, gone. The photographs that had lined the hallway, replaced with framed prints that had nothing to do with us. She appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "You should have called first," she said. Her voice was calm, but the message was sharp. I told her I wanted to see the house. "Our house," she corrected. The words landed like a slap. I moved from room to room, my steps echoing in the unfamiliar layout. It was like walking through a memory that had been edited without my permission. Pieces were missing. Others had been moved just far enough to feel alien. When I reached the kitchen, she was already there, leaning against the counter, watching me, her eyes almost amused. "You'll get used to it," she said. But I knew she didn't mean the furniture. She meant being a visitor, a guest, in a place where I'd once belonged without question. I left without saying goodbye. The rain hit my face as I walked to my car. It didn't wash anything away. It just made the weight in my chest colder. Driving home, I realized something I hadn't wanted to face. She wasn't just taking the house. She was taking the sense of home. And once that was gone, I didn't know how I'd get it back. It happened slowly. Not a clean break. Not all at once. Just one person at a time. A text left unanswered. A call that went straight to voicemail. Plans forgotten. At first, I told myself people were busy. Life gets in the way. But deep down, I knew this was her work. She didn't tell them to leave me. She didn't have to. She made it easier for them to drift away. She told them her version of the story, with careful pauses, and a sigh that said she was protecting me. I ran into Claire at the grocery store. We'd been friends since high school. Her smile was polite, distant. She asked how I was, but not like she used to. Not like she cared about the answer. And then she said it. "She's just worried about you." That same phrase I'd heard before. The same soft blade dressed in concern. I laughed. It sounded brittle, even to me. "Worried?" I asked. Claire shrugged. "Maybe she just wants what's best for you." Best for me. The same woman who had taken my inheritance. My family home. My place in our own history. It happened again with Mark. And with Jenna. People who had once sat at my table, shared my stories, my laughter, now speaking to me like I was a stranger they'd read about. By the end of the month, I'd stopped answering most calls. Not because I didn't want to talk. Because I couldn't stand to hear her words coming out of someone else's mouth. It was more than isolation. It was erasure. Piece by piece, she was removing the witnesses. The ones who could remember the truth. And one night, sitting alone in my kitchen, it hit me. This wasn't about punishing me for something I'd done. It was about making sure no one would stand beside me when the next blow came. It arrived in a plain envelope. No warning, no phone call. Just paper slid through my mail slot. Heavy enough to change everything. I knew what it was before I opened it. That kind of weight, that kind of silence, only comes with bad news. Inside, a legal notice. Clean, precise, cold. She was filing a claim. Not for property, not for money, for control. Control over assets I still had in my name. Control over decisions I thought were mine alone. She argued I was struggling to manage my affairs, that I needed oversight from her. The words sat on the page like a verdict, as if the whispers, the rumors, the careful staging had all been leading here. I read it 3 times. My chest felt tight, not just from anger, from recognition. This was the move she'd been building toward. Every seed she'd planted, every person she'd turned. It all made sense now. Because if no one trusted me, if everyone thought I was unstable, she could take the rest without a fight. I called my lawyer. He was calm, too calm. He'd seen this before. Paper battles are won long before the papers arrive, he said. And I knew what he meant. She'd already won in the court of opinion. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the letter in front of me. The rain tapped against the glass. The refrigerator hummed. And I felt smaller than I'd ever felt. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about erasing my independence, making me need her, on paper, forever. I folded the notice back into the envelope, but the words stayed burned in my mind, because now I understood. She wouldn't stop until I was nothing more than a name she could sign for. I was tired. Not the kind of tired a night's sleep could fix. The kind that sinks into your bones. That makes even breathing feel like work. Weeks had passed since the legal notice. Every day felt heavier than the last. I avoided calls. I avoided people. Even the mirror. My mornings were quiet. Too quiet. I'd make coffee. Let it go cold. Sit at the table, staring at the same spot on the wall. I thought about walking away. From the fight. From the house. From her. Let her have it all. If it meant I could finally stop feeling this weight. But then, something changed. It happened on a Tuesday. I was clearing out a drawer. Not for any reason. Just moving things around because I couldn't sit still. At the very back, under old envelopes and scraps of paper, I found it. A small notebook. The leather cracked at the corners. My father's handwriting on the first page. I opened it. Page after page. Notes about conversations, meetings, dates, and then a line that stopped me cold. Spoke to the lawyer today. She's pressuring us to make changes again. I'm not sure how to tell her no without causing trouble for your sister. Your sister, me. I read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't erase the years of betrayal, but they lit something in me I thought was gone. This wasn't just about what she'd done to me now. It was about what she'd done for years, even when our parents were alive. I sat there with the notebook in my hands, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. I felt ready. It came when I least expected it. Not in a courtroom, not in another envelope, but in the middle of what should have been a safe moment. A family gathering, small, informal, the kind of evening where no one dresses up, and the food is served straight from the stove. I almost didn't go, but part of me wanted to prove I could still show my face, that I wasn't hiding. When I walked in, she was already there, standing by the counter, wineglass in hand, laughing, always laughing. For the first half hour, it was civil. We avoided each other. I spoke to my cousins, my aunt. I thought maybe, just maybe, this night could pass without another wound. Then she stood up, tapped her glass. asked for everyone's attention. "I have some news," she began. Her voice was warm, her smile wide. She looked around the room and landed on me. "I've decided it's time to make things official," she said. She held up a set of keys. "To the house." Murmurs rippled through the room. She went on, explaining how she'd taken responsibility for maintaining the property, how she'd secured the title fully in her name, so there would be no confusion in the future. No confusion. That was the phrase that cut deepest. Because in that moment, in front of everyone, she made it sound like the house had always been hers. Like my connection to it had been imaginary. Someone asked about me, where I fit into the arrangement. She smiled, a soft, pitying smile. "She's free now. No more burdens." The room nodded, agreed. They saw a sister doing something generous. They didn't see the theft, the rewriting, the final lock turning on a door I could never open again. I didn't speak. I couldn't, because anything I said would have sounded bitter. And bitterness was the very mask she'd been painting onto my face for months. She clinked her glass. Everyone drank. And just like that, the last piece of what had been mine was gone. I left early. No goodbyes. Just the quiet hum of my car engine carrying me away from a room that no longer had space for me. It was over. Not the pain, not the anger, but the fight. Because now, there was nothing left to fight for. The days after felt empty. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps into you, that makes you forget what the house used to sound like when people were still yours. Mornings became routine. I'd make tea instead of coffee. The smell of coffee had started to remind me of her. I'd sit by the window and watch the street. Cars passing, people walking dogs, life going on, without me. I didn't visit family much anymore. Not because I didn't want to see them, but because the house, the new house in her name, was where most gatherings happened now. And I couldn't step inside without feeling like I was trespassing. My friends, what was left of them, stopped asking about the situation. Some because they didn't want to stir it up. Others because they didn't believe there was anything left to stir. I kept the notebook I'd found in my father's handwriting on my nightstand. Some nights, I'd read those pages just to remind myself I hadn't imagined the manipulation. It was real. It had been happening for years. But the anger began to dull. Not because I forgave her, because carrying it every day was too heavy. The world outside my window stayed the same. The same trees, the same neighbors. But I'd changed. I didn't walk through life believing family meant safety anymore. Sometimes I'd pass by the old house. Lights glowing in windows I once knew. Curtains pulled in patterns that weren't mine. I'd wonder if she ever thought about me when she turned those lights on. And then I'd laugh quietly to myself, because I knew the answer. Living with the loss wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to exist with the shadow it left behind. And in that shadow, I started to see parts of me she couldn't take. Not the house, not the money, not the past, but the way I'd learned to survive her. And survival would have to be enough. The seasons shifted. Summer bled into autumn. Leaves loosened their grip and floated to the ground. One by one, software unhurried. Life had found a slower rhythm. Not better, not worse, just different. I still thought about her sometimes, not every day, but enough. Like a faint ache from an old injury. Most of the time, you forget it's there. Until the weather changes, and you feel it again. The house wasn't mine. The family wasn't mine in the way it used to be, and I'd stopped trying to make it so. I filled my days with small things, quiet things. The morning light spilling across the kitchen table, the steam curling up from a fresh cup of tea, the sound of rain tapping on the windows. Sometimes I'd walk past a shop window and catch my reflection. For a second, I wouldn't recognize myself. Not because I looked older, but because I looked lighter. The constant bracing for her next move, it was gone. I knew she'd never face consequences. Not the kind you can see. People like her rarely do. Her victories would remain hers, and my losses would remain mine. But in the quiet, I found something she couldn't touch. A life that was mine, even if it was smaller now. A peace that came from no longer standing in her shadow. The wind moved through the trees outside my window. It didn't carry her name anymore. And as I sat there, watching the last of the leaves fall, I whispered a goodbye. Not to her, but to the part of me that still believed she'd ever give anything back. Because I knew she never would.